Do you want to know one of the best reasons it's great that we have AEW? Because now we can sit there as fans and go, who's going to defect next? Who's going to jump to WWE to AEW? And eventually, who's going to jump from AEW to WWE? I mean, we're fantasy booking this stuff every single day. It's just what makes us feel good inside. And at the moment, we have had a lot of people go from World Wrestling Entertainment to All Elite Wrestling. So as ever, given that it is YouTube, we have to take our brains and rank them from the very, very worst to the very, very best. Now, I, being Simon Miller, the positive chap, would be like, oh, they're all amazing. So I went out there, I canvassed people, I had a conversation, and here, as far as I'm concerned, is the definitive list. But there's no such thing as a definitive list, because it's all based on opinions. Please do subscribe. Let's go. Number 11, Matt Hardy. I love Matt Hardy. The dude should have been WWE champion at some point, and I will die on that hill. And also, if you are an upcoming professional wrestler and you need to learn about how to stay relevant in the wrestling business, just look at this guy. He has managed to transform himself time and time again and stay at the top of the game. After leaving WWE in 2020 though, citing creative differences, which I'm not surprised because they booked him in an angle where Randy Orton just tried to boot his head off, although both people did do very well in that, he debuted on March 18th in AEW, and I was very excited. And yes, the internet went nuts when he teleported himself from the stands into the ring, but I massively enjoyed that. Goofy stuff just makes me laugh. The only setback for Hardy, however, though, was that he did debut during a pandemic, meaning there was no fans, and as we quickly found out, the Broken Mac character kind of needed an audience to make it work. I mean, you need thousands of people just going delete, delete, delete. It's called fun. Even then though, I do think a lot of us have forgotten about some of the highlights he did have when he was in that persona. He was awesome in the Stadium Stampede match, and we had the Elite Deletion that took that circle of cinematic matches and brought it full circle. And yes, I know that the powers that be conspired to ensure that his feud with Sammy Guevara was absolutely terrifying. I will never forget Matt Hardy just falling from the skies and landing right on his head. The thing is, when he did realise that the broken universe wasn't working, he changed to Big Money Matt, he got himself a stable, he got himself a group, and I, for one, am enjoying it a lot, especially when it does come to factions, because I've said time and time again, you can never have enough. So we did have to take an extra few paths to get there, but I am chalking this up to another victory and another tick to Matthew Hardy. But admittedly, yes, it wasn't as smooth as it could have been. Number 10, Miro. The former Rusev is an interesting one because I don't actually think we've seen what exactly he's going to be in AEW. In fact, I think we're on the cusp of it now as I am saying these words. I'm intrigued to see where we will be in 12 months' time. Leaving WWE in April 2020 and then debuting on Dynamite in September, he became best friends with Kip Sabian, and the cool thing about all of this was he did have creative freedom and he was allowed to be more of himself, so all of a sudden he was just a gamer that loved playing Call of Duty. And it got a little bit strange because Kip and Miro did have that lengthy feud with the best friends, although the payoff rocked. I mean, how good was Anarchy Arcade? Arcade Anarchy, whichever way. To be fair though, it was stretched out a little bit, and that's because I think most fans just want to see Miro run wild through the roster and tear them limb from limb before he finally does go for the AEW World title. But do not ever forget that he is now in a world where he's not going to be scripted. And even in a scripted world, he was throwing things at Dolph Ziggler and calling Lana a wet fish, which oddly was very entertaining, and I don't know why. So I believe soon, if we were going to redo this list, he would be higher up it. We just gotta bide our time. Number 9, Paul White. This one may have been the biggest surprise to date, because I don't think anybody thought Paul White, the Big Show, was gonna pop up in AEW, and there's evidence to this, because if you go look at the Google searches, they did mad numbers, because people were typing in, why the hell the Big Show in All Elite Wrestling? Coming in February 2021, his main role has to be a commentator on AEW Elevation, and he's done a good job, and you just know he's going to get in the ring at some point. We just got to wait and see. It does mean though, in terms of making a splash overall, we did have that big wapow, and then it calmed down, but again, it's because he's an announcer. There's only so much excitement you're going to generate when you're talking about somebody else's match. It's behind the scenes where he will truly shine though, because imagine being able to go and talk to him about your match. He is going to have a wealth of experience, and it's good for the man himself, because he felt disrespected when once again our friend Randy Orton had pushed him into a chair and yelled in his face, and he was booked to go, I'm really sorry Mr. Orton, I'll never say anything again. The dude is 7 foot tall, and I can't imagine why when he got a better deal to go elsewhere, he said okay, and he went. Number 8, Tai Conte. This is another one that could rise up the ranks as the years do go by, simply because of the point Tai Conte may be about to prove. Signed to WWE for 3 years, she made her debut during the Mae Young Classic, and even though she had some small angles with the likes of the Undisputed Era, for some reason, WWE just never really did anything with her, and then they booted her out the door in April 2020. As soon as her non-compete was done, she was signed to AEW, and again, there wasn't any massive buzz for this, but given that every single week she just got better and better and better and better, to the point, as I say these words once again, she's about to have an AEW women's title shot, well, it begs the question, what the hell was WWE doing? The potential is clearly there, and nobody pulled the trigger. So yeah, if Conte's trajectory continues on this pathway, you may get to a stage where other wrestlers are like, well, look how well she is doing, maybe I should see if the grass is greener too. Number 7, Christian Cage. This is yet another hill I am willing to die on with my big pointy finger. All the praise and all the hyperbole that Christian received as he was coming into AEW was worth it, because he has never gotten his due verbally when he was in WWE, and all these fans that used to say, well, it's not fair what they did to Christian, then betrayed him too when he was brought into a new company, and I won't do the same. Christian Cage is great. Still, given the way this did go down, everybody thought that this new announcement was going to be a John Cena or The Rock, even though that was absolutely ridiculous. So when it was Christian, of course, there was going to be disappointment. That's like telling yourself, when I get home, I'm going to be a multi-millionaire, and then there's just a check for $100,000. That check is still pretty damn good, but you went crazy up here. It meant that straight away Christian was on the back foot, which kind of sums up his career, but it took him one match to remind you how good he is in the ring when he had that match with Frankie Kazarian, which I thought was like a breath of AEW fresh air. The week after too, he was going back and forth with Taz, and it was like stepping into a time machine, and I am truly excited to not only see what he does from a pro wrestler point of view, but to also see what he brings to the company behind the scenes, because much like Paul White, why the hell wouldn't you go to chat to that guy about sports entertaining? He has got to know it all. Number 6, Dustin Rhodes. Dustin Rhodes' story in pro wrestling is pretty damn inspiring, because he has essentially fought for every promotion you can think of over a matter of decades. WWE still agreed to let him go in 2019, although this was good because Dustin wanted to go. He soon joined AEW as a performer and a coach, and if you need any proof that he can still go, and maybe go better than he's ever gone, just go and watch that Double or Nothing match with his brother Cody Rhodes. It will have you crying tears of gold. And that would have justified it anyway, but there's all this talk about how essential he too is behind the scenes, and because of that, look what he's done with QT Marshall. I mean, they were fine as a tag team, but now them falling out has sparked off the Factory Stable, which is yet another group I'm very excited to see. If nothing else, we shouldn't look past the fact that Dustin Rhodes, I believe, is 51 years old and moves like he's a 35-year-old. That's just a random number I pulled out of my ass. What I mean is that he moves very sprightly. It doesn't make any sense. Number 5, Sting. I mean, is this the most excited I have been since AEW begun? The answer is probably. I never saw it coming. I love a good surprise, and it's flippin' Sting. Sting! It got me all nostalgic, which fans loved, and Lapsed fans were eating it up as well. I mean, at one point, the YouTube clip was trending on the service. Furthermore, his exit from WWE had been a little anticlimactic because he had that match with Seth Rollins, he got injured, he was then inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2016, and then he was just gone, and it was a bit like, I don't really know if that's how Sting's career should finish. He totally agreed. He wanted to do it on his own terms. And sure, at first there were too many of those interview segments that went nowhere, but his association with Darby Allin has been perfect, and that Street Fighter Revolution, well, it was just damn fun. I have no idea what the long-term plan is, because I'm not sure what the Stinger can or can't do, but just being able to see him, well, that's enough for me. Number 4, Brody Lee. An entry that carries with it a wave of sadness, given that he did pass away in 2020. We should never forget not only the impact that Brody Lee had on AEW, but the impact he had on the Dark Order, and that in many ways, he saved the whole damn group. Another guy that was screwed by the pandemic because he was meant to make his debut in front of his hometown fans and instead had to come out to nobody. This in many ways was a long time coming. Luke Harper, as he'd been known in WWE, had asked for his release back in April 2019, and when they had said, nope, you ain't getting it, he was trapped in purgatory. All it did was light a fire under his ass though, and when he did walk into All Elite Wrestling in March 2020, he blew the roof off the place. I mean, just go through all that TNT title stuff against Cody Rhodes and that dog collar match. Honestly, go back and watch it now. That is some damn good stuff. So let us never forget the memories, and let's never forget that it was a damn good signing. It's just too important. Number 3, Pac. Another guy who fell into the Luke Harper situation. Angel and Neville just turned up to work one day in 2018 and looked at his WWE bosses and said, I don't want to come here anymore, because even though I've been smashing it as the Cruiserweight Champion, you want to take it off me and hand it to Enzo Amore. He realized then and there they had a very small ceiling and he wasn't going to get to where he wanted to get to in World Wrestling Entertainment, but because they couldn't come to an agreement, he had to sit home for over a year. When he was finally out, he headed to Dragon Gate and smashed a bunch of indies, but it's when he came into AEW that everyone went mad. I mean, try and come up with a better pairing than this. But I don't think the guy has had one bad match, and instead, he's had a bunch of classics. Do you remember the Iron Man match he had with Kenny Omega just on a random episode of Dynamite? That thing was great. It's also the only time within AEW history that a fall has been decided by disqualification. And if I'm wrong, well, the max is like 2. The pandemic also ruined his momentum for a while, but thankfully we found a way around that too. I honestly can't wait to see what he does going forward. I want to see him wrestle everybody. Number 2, FTR. Known as the Revival in WWE, it is not surprising that Cash Wheeler and Dax Harwood were not very happy in that company, because if we know one thing about Vince McMahon is that he looks at tag team wrestling and goes, ha ha pal, where it's okay, but I prefer singles. I mean, that isn't too great for people that just want to be tag team champions, and even though they smashed it down in NXT, when they did make their way into the main roster, their big thing was, well, why don't you just run around and be a couple of goofs? And they did do that very well because they threw themselves into it, but when they did ask for their release and they got it and they headed to AEW, well, look, let's just put it like this. They were having amazing tag team matches in around about a week. Cash and Dax are now also a pivotal part to that tag team division, and as it does continue to get better and better, well, that just makes it even more exciting and once again makes you go, thank goodness they made the jump. Number 1, Jon Moxley. An obvious one, but there's a reason for that, because the sheer chaos that Jon Moxley caused when he allowed his WWE contract to run out and then headed over to AEW. I mean, just go and rewatch his debut from Double or Nothing 2019. It is like seeing a star reborn. Moxley was also finally allowed to be the wrestler he wanted to be and not the stupid and ridiculous Dean Ambrose, so he took that and not only became a credible world champion, but once more had so many good matches. I mean, he took Kenny Omega's head and he smashed it through a table. He's also become a poster boy for the fact that if you can get your creative spark back, that could also reignite your career. Because he is now in demand across the world and also was one of the main people who kept AEW ticking where there were no fans to make a peep. It looks like he's only just getting started too and has crazy big plans. So all in all, this was a sublime move. Now make sure you get down in the comments and mark your own worst to best WWE to AEW defections. Like the video, share the video and subscribe. Head over to whatculture.com where you can read articles like this. Follow us on social media. We want to say hi and there's videos around my head. Just give one of them a click. My name is Simon for What Culture. Thank you for joining me as always. And yes, for the negative Nancy's out there, when people do start jumping from AEW to WWE, we will make another video that talks about that. See ya.